One of the critical areas for ensuring that you practice proper animal handling care is in the hospital pen. It's here when you're faced with cattle that are stressed, sick, or injured, so everything you do needs to be focused on keeping animals comfortable and quiet, thus allowing them to recover from illness or injury as quick as possible.
With handling the sick cattle, we need to understand that these animals, a lot of times when they're sick, can be frightened, scared, because they don't know what's going on with themselves. And if they haven't been handled appropriately in the front end stages of the cattle feeding area, they may not have the ability to trust the pen rider or the person that's coming in to move them out of the pen. People have to understand and be able to identify the sick cattle within their home pen. And a lot of the different clinical signs that go along with bovine respiratory disease, such as a depression, their loss of appetite or being gant and slab-sided. The other thing might be an increase in respiratory rate. And the old adage that sick cattle don't eat and cattle that don't eat get sick really comes into play when we're talking about identification of cattle within the home pen, that something isn't quite right, that we need to move them to a different system to where we can get closer and get a better diagnosis. Once we identify these sick cattle, we're going to then move them out of the home pen in a fashion that we want those animals to feel as if they've made the decision to leave the home pen without stirring up the rest of the pen. These hospital pens are a great example of what we're looking for. When you take a look at the pens here, you'll notice that we have dry pen floors with good drainage. We have a clean water supply for all animals. We have a feed bunk that all animals can get to the bunk at once. Also, you notice that there's more than adequate space within this pen. When we talk about 150 to 300 square foot, there's probably 400 to 500 square foot in these pens. And then the other thing that really catches my eye about these pens is the ability to have shade and also have a windbreak. The shade would be there to prevent heat stress and to give these animals a place to cool off. The north wall on these barns is there to serve as a windbreak during the winter and more of our colder climates. When we have animals suffering from bovine respiratory disease, the way that animals cool their body is through evaporative cooling through respiration. So these animals that are impaired or are sick with bovine respiratory disease have decreased lung capacity, therefore have a decreased capacity to cool their body. And when there's hot temperatures or when it's warmer weather, or if we move these animals in an excessive fashion where we stress them, they don't have the ability, like an animal that's not suffering from bovine respiratory disease, to cool themselves down. Animals that are coming to the hospital are going to be from different pens, therefore they're going to be different sized. And sometimes it's appropriate to separate the larger animals and the smaller animals as we move them through the hospital system. We want to quickly move those animals through the snake. We want to bring them into the chute. We want to get a proper diagnosis. Really important to work with your veterinarian to get a proper treatment protocol for the different things that you're going to diagnose. Once we have the diagnosis, we want to apply the treatment, and then those animals are going to be taken away from the hospital into the hospital pen. Not always do our treatments work appropriately, and not all animals can be saved. And I think that's one thing that we need to recognize as an industry. It's better to be a week too early than it is to be a day late when it comes to humane euthanasia. And these animals that are not responding, we have an obligation to those animals to relieve their suffering through humane euthanasia.
It's critically important to have good euthanasia equipment. There are two basic forms of euthanasia that we use. One would be a live round out of a gun, and the other would be using a captive bolt system such as this one. We want to make sure that when we do euthanize one, it's quick and painless, and the gun and this captive bolt system are the only two that's really approved for use.
Remember that cattle actually cool themselves through breathing. That's why sick cattle can become overheated easily. And these sick cattle not only need treatment, but special attention needs to be paid to their water and feed, and when weather requires it, shelter or bedding. For those that are not going to recover, euthanasia needs to be utilized in a timely manner so the cattle don't suffer. Lastly, remember, stress can actually limit the beneficial effects of the medication.
I think in summary, when you talk about handling of healthy or sick animals, one thing to remember is that moving animals and getting our job done is a quality, not quantity driven task. And recognizing the types of cattle that you're working with, where their flight zone is, what their apprehensions are. And the big thing is for any feed yard is that it's the people that are doing the job. And we have to focus on creating a culture within the feed yard that cattle handling, cattle well-being, and health are the most important things when we come to work every day.